They threw my son out of his own restaurant at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, told him he didn't belong there anymore, told him his mother's name meant nothing. My son called me from the parking lot, his voice cracking. "Mom, they made me sign everything over. I didn't understand what I was signing." I set down my coffee. "Where are you right now?" "Standing outside Harbor Blue. They changed the locks already." I grabbed my car keys. "Stay right there. Don't talk to anyone. Don't sign anything else." He was quiet for a moment. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize," I said. "Just wait for me." I drove 17 minutes through Savannah traffic to get to him. When I pulled into the lot, I saw my son sitting on the curb outside the restaurant I'd built with my bare hands 31 years ago. His daughter was beside him, 6 years old, in her school uniform, backpack still on, eating a granola bar like this was normal. Like sitting on a curb outside a locked building was just another Tuesday. My son looked up when he heard my car. His eyes were red. He'd been crying but had stopped, probably when his daughter came out of school. Trying to hold it together. I parked, got out, walked over. Didn't rush. You learn, after 6 decades on this earth, that panic helps nobody. My granddaughter saw me first. "Nana, are we going to eat at Daddy's restaurant?" I crouched down, smoothed her hair. "Not today, baby. We're going to Nana's house. I'll make you shrimp and grits." She grinned. That was enough for her. 6 years old and the world was still simple. I looked at my son. "Get in the car. Both of you." He opened his mouth. "Mom, I need to explain." "In the car. You'll explain at my house." He nodded, picked up his daughter, buckled her into the back seat. I watched him through the rearview mirror as we drove. He stared out the window, jaw tight, hands clasped together so hard his knuckles were white. He didn't know it yet. His wife didn't know it. Her parents certainly didn't know it. But Harbor Blue, the restaurant they thought they'd just stolen, and its 3 sister locations along the Georgia coast, sat on land I owned through a trust so layered that the best real estate attorneys in the Southeast would need 6 months to trace it. I'd let them play. Let them think they were building something on my foundation. Now playtime was over. Welcome to today's story, everyone. Before we begin, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Quick reminder, this story contains dramatized elements for storytelling and educational purposes. Some names and details are fictionalized, but the core lessons about recognizing manipulation in family relationships are absolutely real. My name is Eleanor Marsh. I'm 63 years old. I built Marsh Coastal Dining from a single seafood shack on Tybee Island in 1995. Back then, I was 32, recently divorced, with a 7-year-old son named Julian and $4,300 in a savings account. My ex-husband left us for a woman he met at a conference in Atlanta. Took the house, the car, most of the money. Left me with Julian and a dream that everybody said was stupid. A black woman opening a fine dining seafood restaurant in coastal Georgia in the 90s. People laughed. Banks turned me down 11 times. I got the 12th loan because the banker's wife had eaten my cooking at a church fundraiser and told her husband if he didn't give me that money, she'd never forgive him. That was the beginning. 31 years later, Marsh Coastal Dining operates 4 restaurants, a catering company, and a seafood supply chain that serves 47 establishments across 3 states. Revenue last year was $22 million. I tell you this not to boast. I tell you this so you understand what they tried to take from me. Julian married Vanessa Caldwell 3 years ago. She was beautiful, charming, educated, master's degree in hospitality management from Cornell. Her family owned a chain of boutique hotels across the Southeast. The Caldwells. Old money, old connections, the kind of family that hosted charity dinners where the champagne cost more than my first month's rent. I had concerns. I always have concerns. That's what 30 years of building something from nothing teaches you. Everyone smiles until they want what's yours. But Julian loved her, and love makes people blind in ways that money never does. 6 months after the wedding, Vanessa's father, Richard Caldwell, proposed a partnership. Merge Marsh Coastal Dining's reputation and supply chain with Caldwell Hospitality's hotel network. Synergy, he called it. A powerhouse. He sat in my office with that silver hair and that country club tan and laid out a proposal that on the surface looked brilliant. I smiled, said I'd think about it. Then I called my attorney. What my attorney found made my stomach turn. The Caldwells had done this before. Twice. 2 family businesses absorbed into Caldwell Hospitality over the past 15 years. Both founders pushed out within 2 years. Both families left with nothing. One couple lost their home. The other hadn't spoken to their son since. The Caldwells didn't partner. They consumed. I didn't tell Julian. That was my mistake, and I'll carry it. I should have shown him the file. Should have trusted him with the truth. But he was so happy. Vanessa was pregnant. My grandchild was coming. I couldn't bring myself to break his heart with paperwork. Instead, I protected us quietly. When the partnership went through, I restructured everything. The restaurants operated under Caldwell Marsh Coastal LLC, but the land, every square foot under every building, stayed in my trust. The seafood supply contracts, the vendor relationships I'd spent decades building, stayed in my name through a separate entity. The recipes, the brand trademarks, the intellectual property, all mine. I gave them the keys but kept the locks. And I watched. For 3 years, I watched. At first, everything was fine. Julian ran Harbor Blue. Vanessa managed operations at the other locations. Richard Caldwell handled the financial side. They hit revenue targets. Opened the 4th restaurant in Hilton Head. Things were good. Then, 14 months ago, the pattern started. Small things first. Julian mentioned that Vanessa had reorganized the management structure. His 2 most loyal managers, people who'd worked for me for over a decade, were reassigned to the Hilton Head location, an hour and a half from home, replaced by Caldwell employees Julian had never met. Then the financial reports started coming to me late, then not at all. When I asked Richard about quarterly numbers, he smiled that silver-haired smile and said, "Eleanor, we're handling it. You should be enjoying retirement." I wasn't retired. I'd never used that word. But he'd already decided what I was. 8 months ago, Julian came to Sunday dinner looking like he hadn't slept in days. I asked what was wrong. He said nothing. Vanessa was beside him, her hand on his arm, smiling that perfect smile. My granddaughter, Lily, sat in her high chair eating mashed potatoes, oblivious and perfect. After dinner, when Vanessa took Lily upstairs for a bath, Julian stayed in the kitchen. He stood at the sink, staring out the window. "Talk to me," I said. He was quiet for a long time. Then, Dad told me I should be grateful. "Richard told you that?" He said most men my age don't get opportunities like this. Said I should stop asking questions about the books and just trust the process. Julian turned to me. "Mom, I asked to see the bank statements for Harbor Blue. He told me it wasn't my concern." My hands tightened on the dishcloth. "What did Vanessa say?" "She said her father knows what he's doing, said I was being paranoid." He paused. "She said that exact same thing 3 times this week. 'You're being paranoid, Julian.'" Like she rehearsed it. That was the moment I made the call to Marcus Webb, my private investigator. Marcus had worked with me for 15 years. Corporate fraud, employee theft, vendor disputes. He was thorough, discreet, and he owed me nothing but loyalty born from respect. That kind of loyalty can't be bought, only earned. What Marcus found over the next 6 months broke my heart and sharpened my resolve. Richard Caldwell had been siphoning money from all 4 restaurants. Not obviously, he was too smart for that. He'd created a network of shell vendors, fake supply companies that billed Caldwell Marsh Coastal for products and services that didn't exist, cleaning supplies from a company registered to a P.O. box in Jacksonville, linen services from a business whose only employee was Richard's college roommate, consulting fees to a firm that had no office, no website, no phone number. Total over 14 months. $1.8 million. But that wasn't the worst of it. Marcus found loan applications, 6 of them, all in Julian's name, all with Julian's signature, all approved by banks where Richard Caldwell had personal relationships. Total borrowed, $940,000. Julian had no idea these loans existed. The signatures were forged. Marcus hired a forensic handwriting analyst who confirmed it in a week. They weren't just stealing from my business, they were building Julian a financial prison. If everything collapsed, and it would, Julian would be the one holding the bag. The debt, the fraud, the criminal liability, all of it would fall on my son while the Caldwells walked away clean. I sat in my office the night Marcus delivered the final report. 300 pages. I read every word. Then I poured a glass of sweet tea. I don't drink bourbon, never have, and I stood at my window watching the Savannah River slide by in the dark. This is what they did. This is what they always did. Find a family business with real value. Marry into it. Smile their way through the front door. Then dismantle it from the inside, brick by brick, until there was nothing left but debt and blame. 2 families before us. 2 families destroyed. There wouldn't be a third. I started with the money. At 7:30 the next morning, I sat across from Diane Foster at Savannah First National. Diane and I had been doing business since 2003. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. Diane, I need to pull the operating credit line for Caldwell Marsh Coastal. All 4 locations. Effective immediately. She looked at me over her reading glasses. Eleanor, that's $800,000 in active credit. Payroll is due Friday. I know exactly what it is. If I pull this, they can't make payroll, vendors won't get paid, the restaurants could shut down within a week. They won't shut down, I said. I have plans for those restaurants, but the credit line dies today. Diane studied me for a long moment. She'd known me long enough to recognize when I wasn't negotiating. I'll process it within the hour. Thank you, Diane. I drove from the bank to my attorney's office. Christine Bellamy had been my lawyer for 20 years. She was 5'2", 115 pounds, and she terrified opposing counsel in every courtroom she entered. How much do we have? She asked, already opening her legal pad. I laid the folder on her desk. Embezzlement, forged signatures, identity theft, fraudulent loan applications. 6 loans totaling $940,000 under Julian's name. 14 months of fake vendor billing, and this. I slid the final document across. Richard Caldwell attempted to use my federal food safety certifications, the ones tied to my supply chain, registered in my name as collateral for a $2.3 million loan. Christine's pen stopped. He tried to leverage your certifications? If that loan had defaulted, the federal government could have revoked my food safety licenses. Every restaurant, every supply contract, every vendor relationship gone. 31 years of work, destroyed. Christine closed the folder. When do you want to move? Friday night. The Savannah Business Association dinner at the DeSoto Hotel. Richard Caldwell is receiving the Entrepreneur of the Year award. She raised an eyebrow. Poetic. Practical. Every camera in the city will be there. The credit freeze hit at 9:45 that morning. I know because Marcus had installed security cameras in the Caldwell Marsh corporate office 6 months earlier. Hidden in the smoke detectors, the picture frames, the potted plant Richard's secretary watered every Tuesday. I watched the feed from my home office. Richard was at his desk when the first call came in. A vendor, then another, then the payroll company. His face went from confused to red to white in approximately 11 minutes. He called the bank. Diane delivered the script I'd given her. System error, under review, no timeline. By noon, Richard Caldwell was sweating through his 3rd shirt of the day. At 2:15, my son's phone rang. I was sitting with him at my kitchen table. Lily was napping upstairs. Christine sat beside me. Julian looked at the screen. It's Vanessa. Answer it. Speaker. He did. Julian. Her voice was tight, controlled, the way someone sounds when they're reading from a card someone else wrote. My father wants to discuss the situation. What situation? The credit freeze. The bank issue. He thinks your mother is behind it. Julian looked at me. I nodded for him to continue. And if she is? Vanessa's voice changed. Harder now. Then she needs to fix it. Immediately, or my father will activate the morality clause in the partnership agreement and remove you from all 4 restaurants. On what grounds? Financial mismanagement, your mother's interference. Julian, listen to me. Her voice dropped. If you don't get her to back off, my father will file charges. He has documentation showing financial irregularities in your accounts. loans you took out, expenditures you authorized. Julian's hand was shaking. I never took out any loans. The paperwork says otherwise. 24 hours, Julian. Fix this, or Lily and I go to my parents' house and you won't see her until a judge decides you should. The line went dead. Christine clicked her pen. Extortion, custodial coercion, conspiracy to commit fraud. And we have it recorded. She looked at me. That's the second documented threat. We need one more for a pattern. We'll get it, I said. But first, I need to find someone. Marcus had briefed me 3 days earlier. During his investigation of Richard Caldwell's previous partnerships, he'd tracked down the daughter-in-law from the second family the Caldwells had destroyed. Her name was Grace Nguyen. She'd married the Caldwells' nephew 8 years ago. Same pattern. Married in, brought into the business, then systematically stripped of everything she'd contributed. When she tried to fight back, they produced forged documents showing she'd embezzled from the company. She couldn't afford a lawyer. She lost custody of her son for 11 months before a legal aid attorney got the ruling overturned. Grace was living in a small apartment in Brunswick, working 2 jobs. She hadn't spoken about what happened to her in 6 years. I drove to Brunswick myself, knocked on her door at 4 in the afternoon. She opened it, saw me a stranger, well-dressed, standing on her doorstep, and immediately started to close it. My name is Eleanor Marsh. Richard Caldwell is doing to my son what he did to you. The door stopped. She stared at me through the gap. I know what they took from you, I said. I know about the forged documents, the custody fight, all of it. Silence. I'm going to stop them. But I need your help. She opened the door slowly. Her eyes were careful, guarded, the eyes of someone who'd learned that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Why should I believe you? Because I have 300 pages of evidence that proves they did the exact same thing to my family. And because in 4 days, Richard Caldwell is going to stand on a stage and accept an award for being a great businessman, and I'm going to show every person in that room exactly what kind of man he is. Grace was quiet for a long time. Then she stepped aside. Come in. We talked for 3 hours. She told me everything. The isolation. How they convinced her she was difficult, ungrateful, unstable. How her husband, the Caldwell's nephew, had recorded her arguments without her knowledge, then played the recordings in court to make her look erratic. How they'd told her son she'd abandoned him. They have a script, she said quietly. Everything they do, they've done before. They practice it. I know, I said. And this time, we're rewriting the ending. Grace agreed to testify. She drove back to Savannah with me that evening. When she walked into my living room and saw Julian, they looked at each other the way survivors do. Not with pity, with recognition. They told you it was your fault, Grace said. Julian nodded. It wasn't. He broke then, my strong, proud son. He sat on my couch and cried like he was 7 years old again, and Grace sat beside him, a stranger who understood him completely, and let him. I stepped into my office and closed the door. The DeSoto Hotel ballroom was gold and white, crystal chandeliers, 250 guests, the kind of evening where Savannah's elite pretended the world outside didn't exist. I wore a simple black dress. No jewelry except the pearl earrings my mother gave me before she died. The ones she wore when she worked double shifts at the hospital so I could go to college. Those earls reminded me where I came from, what I was built from. Julian stood to my left, Grace to my right. Christine Bellamy waited near the stage entrance with a USB drive and a direct line to Detective Carolyn Hayes of the Savannah Chatham Metro Police. Richard Caldwell took the stage at 8:15. Silver hair, perfect suit, that smile. He held the Crystal Award like he deserved it. This recognition means the world to me, he told the room. I've spent my career building partnerships, creating opportunities, strengthening the businesses that make our community great. I pulled out my phone, typed one word to my tech specialist in the AV booth. Now, the lights dimmed. The projection screen behind Richard flickered. White text on a black background. The truth about Richard Caldwell. Security camera footage began playing. Richard's office. Him on the phone, laughing, saying words that carried through the ballroom speakers with perfect clarity. Julian doesn't suspect a thing. By the time we're done, every dollar of debt will be in his name. The kid's too trusting, just like his mother. The room went silent. 250 people stopped breathing. The screen changed. Bank documents, forged signatures highlighted in red. Expert analysis overlaid. All signatures confirmed fraudulent. 6 loan applications. Julian's name. Julian's forged handwriting. $940,000 of debt my son never knew about. Richard grabbed the microphone. "This is ridiculous. Someone has tampered with." His audio cut out. The microphone went dead, but the speakers worked perfectly. The screen kept scrolling. Shell vendor invoices, fake companies, P.O. boxes with no businesses behind them, 1.8 million siphoned over 14 months. Every dollar traced. Every transaction documented. Then the screen split. 2 timelines, side by side. On the left, documents from the Harrison family, the Caldwell's first victims. Partnership agreement signed 2009. Financial irregularities beginning 2010. Forged loan applications 2011. Family business bankrupt by 2012. On the right, documents from Grace Nguyen's case. Same pattern, same timeline, same forged signatures, same shell companies, even some of the same fake vendor names. And in the center, a third column appeared. Marsh Coastal Dining. Same pattern, same playbook, different family. A woman in the front row gasped, "Oh my God, he's done this 3 times." Grace stood up from her seat. The crowd noticed. Heads turned. She walked to the stage slowly. Richard's face went gray. "My name is Grace Nguyen," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. 8 years ago, Richard Caldwell's family did to me exactly what you're seeing on this screen. They married into my family, they smiled, they promised partnership, then they stole everything I had and took my son away from me for almost a year. She paused. I thought I was alone. I thought no one would believe me. I was wrong. Julian stood next, walked to the stage, stood beside Grace. "My name is Julian Marsh. 6 months ago, I discovered that my father-in-law had forged my signature on nearly $1 million in loans. He tried to steal my mother's business. He threatened to take my daughter away from me if I didn't cooperate." Julian's voice was steady, stronger than I'd heard it in months. He told me I should be grateful. I stood last, walked through the silent ballroom. 250 faces turned toward me. I didn't rush, climbed the stairs, took the microphone from the podium where it sat, useless in Richard's frozen hands. "My name is Eleanor Marsh. 31 years ago, I built a restaurant from nothing, 1 shack, $4,300. I didn't have connections. I didn't have old money. I had 2 hands and a son who needed me to be strong." I looked at Richard. "The restaurants you claim to run? I own the land under every single one of them. The supply chain you bragged about in your acceptance speech? Mine. The vendor relationships, the food safety certifications, the brand you thought you'd taken? All mine. You never owned anything, Richard. You were a guest in my house, and your invitation just expired." The ballroom doors opened. Detective Hayes entered with 4 officers. "Richard Caldwell," she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, and conspiracy." Officers moved forward. Handcuffs clicked. Richard started talking, demanding, threatening, mentioning lawyers and judges and people he knew. The officers didn't respond. They just walked him toward the door. As he passed me, he stopped, looked at me with pure contempt. "You'll regret this, Eleanor. You have no idea who you're dealing with." I held his gaze. "I've known exactly who I was dealing with for 3 years. That's why you're wearing handcuffs and I'm standing here." They took him out. The sirens faded. The ballroom erupted. People talking, cameras flashing, reporters surging forward. I turned. Julian and Grace stood together at the base of the stage. I walked down to them. We held each other. 3 people who refused to be erased. The courtroom smelled like old wood and floor polish. Federal courthouse, downtown Savannah. Christine sat beside me, Julian on my other side, Grace behind us. Lily sat on her father's lap, drawing pictures in a coloring book, unaware that the man in the orange jumpsuit across the room was her grandfather. Judge Thomas Warren read the verdict without emotion. Richard Caldwell, on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, and pattern financial predation, I sentence you to 20 years in federal prison. You are ordered to pay $4.2 million in restitution to your victims." Richard didn't look at us, didn't look at anyone. The officers led him away. Vanessa wasn't in the courtroom. She'd filed for divorce 2 weeks after her father's arrest, moved to her aunt's house in Virginia. She'd signed away all claims to Julian's business, his assets, his daughter. Christine said she'd probably known what her father was doing. We'd never be able to prove it. But she was gone, and that was enough. Julian cried in the hallway after. Quiet tears. Relief and grief mixed together, because even when someone hurts you that badly, losing them still leaves a hole. I held him and let him feel it. By afternoon, we were standing in the lobby of Harbor Blue, the restaurant my son had built into the best seafood dining experience on the Georgia coast, the one they'd locked him out of 8 weeks ago. The staff had gathered. When Julian walked through the front door, they applauded. Some of them cried. Betty Simmons, our head chef for 19 years, handed him a fresh apron. "Welcome back, boss," she said. Julian put on the apron, stood behind the bar, looked around the room at the people who'd believed in him, who'd kept the restaurant running during the worst weeks of his life. "Let's get back to work," he said. 3 weeks later, Grace opened her doors. A small office on Bull Street, downtown Savannah. The sign read Second Foundation in clean white letters. Underneath, support for families targeted by financial predators. I donated the first $500,000 from the Marsh Foundation. Julian committed 10% of Harbor Blue's annual profits. The Harrison family, the Caldwell's first victims, who Marcus had finally tracked down in Macon, donated their time as volunteer counselors. At the ribbon cutting, Grace spoke to a crowd of reporters and community members. "Financial predators don't look like criminals," she said. "They look like family. They look like opportunity. They look like love. And they rely on one thing above all else, your silence. We're here to break that silence." That evening, I drove to Tybee Island, parked at the beach, walked to the spot where my seafood shack used to stand. It's a parking lot now, but I can still see it when I close my eyes. The hand-painted sign, the folding table where I took orders. Julian, 7 years old, sitting on a cooler doing homework while I fried shrimp. I sat on the seawall, watched the tide come in. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian, a photo. Lily at the restaurant, sitting on the kitchen counter, wearing an apron that was way too big for her, grinning. Underneath the photo, she says she wants to be a chef like Nana. I smiled. The first real smile in months. Footsteps on the sand. Julian appeared, Lily on his shoulders. Grace walked beside them. They'd driven out together without telling me. Lily scrambled down, ran to me, held out a small shell she'd found. "Nana, look! It's cracked, but it's still pretty." I took the shell, turned it in the fading light. "You know why it's pretty, baby?" "Why?" "Because the ocean tried to break it, and it survived. It washed up right here on this beach, right where your Nana started everything. This shell is tough." Lily looked at the shell, then at me. "Like you, Nana." Julian put his hand on my shoulder. Grace stood beside us, 4 people on a beach at sunset, watching the waves do what waves have always done: crash, retreat, crash again. The water doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care about your money or your name or how many times you've been knocked down. It just keeps coming. And you either drown or you learn to swim. I learned to swim a long time ago. If there's one thing this grandmother wants you to take from this story, it's this: protect your foundation. Not just your money, not just your business. Protect the people you love by paying attention, by asking questions when something doesn't feel right, by trusting your instincts even when everyone around you says you're overreacting. Manipulators don't announce themselves. They charm. They flatter. They promise the world while they're stealing the ground beneath your feet. And they count on you being too polite, too trusting, too afraid of conflict to stop them. Don't be polite when your family is at stake. Don't be trusting when the numbers don't add up. Don't be afraid of conflict when someone is taking what you built. Like, subscribe, and share this story. If it helps one person recognize the pattern before it's too late, then every word was worth it. And if you're living this right now, if someone is controlling your money, isolating you from family, making you doubt your own mind, hear me. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're being targeted by someone who practices this. And you can stop them, but you have to move first. God bless you all. Stay sharp. Stay free. Final note, this content contains dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the core lessons about recognizing financial manipulation and family predation are real. If this style isn't for you, that's okay. Please seek content that best fits your needs.